There's a huge historic element to what we're doing. A lot of people think a sunken ship, you're going to dive in the water and you're just going to see, there's a ship. No, why we're different is they find a shipwreck, but they don't know what they're looking for. And a lot of times they're looking for gold. Sometimes they're looking for other cultural material. So they just start digging everything up because they don't know what to dig up. And in doing that, a lot of times they destroy the shipwreck. And that's what the archaeological community and the regulatory community has issues with. The economics of what we're doing through the technology it's game changing from that perspective.
But taking that just a step further, obviously I love our Juneau site because it's massive, it's old, it's, to my knowledge, never been salvaged, right? If there was zero on Juneau, first I'd cry a little bit, okay? But I'd get over it in a couple minutes, and then I'd go after 5 more shipwrecks that I know where they are, and they're between the 1500s and 1600s. They've never been salvaged to our knowledge. There's no records of their salvage, etc. We'd put that sea searcher on those. I'd find out real quick. Hey, do these things have anything of any value, right?
Welcome to the Legacy Angel Network Venture Lounge, where nothing ventured is nothing changed. For Matt Helmentaler, press 1. For member services, press 2. For real raw startup stories, press 3. For all other questions or concerns, please wait on the line in our...
Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Helmentaler, and you're listening to Venture Lounge, after-hour conversations with founders and investors. These are the stories, insights, and conversations that you aren't going to find on the company website. Because the real lessons you learn in the startup world, the risks you take as an entrepreneur, the highs and the lows, the moments in your journey when no one else believes in you right before you break through. Those are the moments that you just have to hear for yourself. So grab a drink and listen in to the men and women who are changing the world. Welcome to the Venture Lounge.
Did I ever mention I have no imagination?
No, go ahead and elaborate on that, Tim.
Go ahead and elaborate. I would tend to disagree.
As in, you can't. Yeah, can you just not? No, you got to tell me now.
No.
I'm too interested. Yeah.
You don't know.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to Venture Lounge. Nothing ventured, nothing changed. Seafarer Exploration in the building.
And Wild Manta.
And Wild Manta in the building. I'm Connor Sherman, creative director here at Legacy, and Matt Helmentaler, our founder of Legacy in the House. What's up?
Hello, hello.
Go ahead and introduce who's sitting on the couch with us this week, man.
I'm happy to. Yeah, so these gentlemen to my right, the first one I'd like to introduce is Mr. Tim Reynolds. Timaroo, as I like to call him.
He loves that too.
Or
you
the
can see
happy
the
Timmy.
expression on his face.
He hates both of those things. But really good friend of mine. Tim and I met 6.5 years ago, I think somewhere in that vicinity. We met 6.5 years ago, and I actually used to work for Tim's company, Wild Manta. And that's a whole other story how we kind of got together. But my relationship with Tim really kind of spurred everything that we're doing now as Legacy Angel Network. So it's really education, vision, stuff I got from Tim. And so anyway, he's a really cool guy. Previous founder of a company called Cineticom, and I'll let him talk more about that later as well. And then the other gentleman to my right is Mr. Kyle Kennedy, the founder of Seafarer Explorations.
By the way, I can't look at Kyle without smiling. He just has you really just like a joy, dude. Yeah. You're a joy to be around.
I always tell everyone, what's he like? He's jolly.
Yeah,
jolly.
He's just a jolly guy. He's just jolly. You know. Yeah. But so I met Kyle through a mutual friend, Kyle's background prior to being the president and founder of Seafarer Explorations, he was a broker dealer and took specializes in taking companies public and has his own kind of claim to fame to that. So these guys are just really good dudes, really amazing backgrounds, lots of lessons learned, things that they could teach us that they have taught us. And so I think they're absolutely going to be amazing guests today. But can I also say, these guys are working on a project together. And what's funny is that, sorry, they could not be more opposite of people. So it's really neat to kind of, we were all talking earlier, and I was saying, you remember the A-Team, and how the A-Team was this motley group of guys that, Hannibal brought together, but they went out to accomplish a goal.
I think Tim took offense, by the way, of you calling him motley or associating that.
Motley crew, like
it's a rock and roll term, Tim. It's a
well, I mean, it is, but it's but they, I mean, anyway. Look, these two guys who really have very little in common have been able to come together and do some really, really cool things.
Well, that's the nature of your guys' project in general, like Seafarer Exploration, are these two worlds, two industries, mentalities that have never met before.
Right.
Elaborate that. Well, first, gentlemen, just tell us who you are, what you do, give us your background and why you're sitting here with us.
Yeah, Tim, start.
Wow.
Oh, by the way, cheers, guys. Thanks so much for coming. Cheers.
All right.
We appreciate you guys
Thank
joining
you.
us on the fastest growing Palm Bay adjacent podcast in the world. All right.
Perfect.
I started my career like a normal engineer, new grad out of college. Went to work with a local company called Harris Corporation. And right in the mid-'90s, when all the dot-com and telecom boom was happening, Harris decided to do a bunch of spin-outs. And they came to me and they said, would you like to be a part of one of these spin-outs? And little did I know at that time, spin-out meant you are no longer employed with Harris. You are on your own and you have to go raise money. So I took that leap just as my first daughter was being born.
Wow.
And
how did Susan feel about that?
She was very supportive, but not very patient. So we started, and Harris would give you the technology, and then you had to go raise the money for it. Now, at that time, raising money was actually pretty easy. So we raised about $30 million to go build a nationwide truck and trailer tracking system. But what was interesting is here I am, an engineer just out of Harris, and one of the first things we have to do is we have to hire our CEO. So we start interviewing CEOs of public companies, ex-CEOs of private companies. And I'm sitting there interviewing the guy who would ultimately become the CEO, and this thought goes through my head. If this fool can be a CEO, so can I. Seriously. I mean, what it takes to build a company
on the Venture Lounge.
is not the same as what it takes to maintain a company. And he had no idea of what it was going to take to grow a company. He was the CEO of an existing company. So what it let me know at that time was that it's all a learning process. I don't think it matters whether you're a seasoned professional or whether you're a new start. If you're willing to go out and do the work and learn, then you can be the CEO of a company. So I worked for that company for a couple of years, and then in the dot-com telecom boom, I came up with a business model that basically said, because I'm an engineer by trade, and that's where my heart is. I create things. I like inventing things and creating new things. So I said, I'll do the technical piece of your business plan, because at that time that was the hard part. Because if you could do the marketing piece, and then somebody else did the marketing piece, so the business owner would do the marketing piece, and I do the technical piece. And from 1998 to 2000, we built many systems and many products. And I did some of that for money and some of it for stock. So in 2000, 2001, when the dot-com telecom bubble burst, I had a nice set of wallpaper of stock certificates that I could wallpaper my house with that were absolutely worthless. But I learned a lot in doing that of how to raise money, how to organize a business, dozens of different businesses, why they succeeded, why they failed. My business as a whole did really well. I did not lose revenue. I did not lose traction. We kept growing. By the time the dot-com telecom bubble burst, we had actually diversified from just commercial to commercial and defense. So the defense stuff picked way up in 2001 with September 11, and it became a bigger part of our business. So, diversifying in the market, understanding where your customers are, how to do business in various markets was a big piece of what we did. So we kept growing, and I think it was 2003 or 2004, we were on the Inc. 500 list of one of the 500 fastest growing private companies in the U.S. We were about halfway up that list at 688% 3-year growth.
Wow.
So we did pretty good. During that time, I mean, just with any business, there's all these milestones you hit as you grow a business. When it's 3 guys, you can run your business one way. When it's 20 people, it's another way. When it got up to 125, I say, somebody was mad at somebody every day. So you're more of a babysitter than you are a CEO. I think you get that now. I don't think you're not even at 150. You get
Right. Only need 10 to do that. I'm ahead of the game.
But at that, so your business has to change. We had to change, and we had to restructure, and we got organized, and we came up with a way to develop business that allowed us to predict our revenue going forward fairly accurately, and we operated at that level for several years until a large defense contractor saw what we were doing and said, "We want to become more like you, and we want to acquire you." So we sold our company to a large defense contractor in 2009, and they failed at that. They did not become like us. We became more like them, which is why I left that company a year later, because I am committed to my customers. I'm committed to innovation and creativity, and that is hard to do. Gets harder and harder to do the larger the business is. So I left and started Wild Manta, which is really focused on helping create new businesses. I had a pretty decent success with my company. It wasn't a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It was a normal-sized company, typical of a startup when it gets acquired. But I wanted to give back, so I started helping the small businesses that in town with the idea of creating as many new businesses and as many new product companies in this area as I could do. And that's what I've been doing for over a decade now. And you've interviewed some of them. Swift Paws was one of the ones that came to us with an idea and not much of a plan, and we worked with them to get that product built and get it out to market. And now they're on their way. They're going to be successful.
Are there key components that you feel like you learned, Tim? I mean, obviously there's a lot to break down there, but what is Wild Manta bringing to a company like Swift Paws that allows them to accelerate their growth and become more tightly structured in the organization and just thrive,
So one of the things I noticed over the years, as we grew businesses and grew our business, is a new start company is generally strong in one area. So, for example, if it's a marketing guy or a guy that's good at sales, he knows that he can sell it, but he has no idea how to build it. If it's an engineer, he generally knows exactly how to build what he wants to build, but he has no idea how to sell it.
Right.
And what we try to do is look at all the pieces of that pie that it takes to make a healthy company and to make a successful company. And we try to incorporate all those pieces. Sometimes it's regulatory, sometimes it's marketing, sometimes it's engineering. Yeah. So it's getting all those pieces in place, because if you don't get them all in place, you can fail for a myriad of reasons, and I've seen a lot of those happen. And I think that differentiates what I enjoy doing, which is that part, differentiates me from an incubator or something that is really just a place where you go, maybe get a little bit of help, but they're not looking at your business as a whole. So I try to look at it as a 360-degree pie that I'm trying to make better.
Kyle, give us your intro, where you started, where you're going, because I want to paint both of the pictures of both your worlds before we kind of bring them together.
Well, I was just sort of a poor old country boy growing up out in the woods in Arkansas. And we lived down a dirt road, and if it rained very hard, the bridge would wash out, And we built our house by hand. And my brothers, I got 3 brothers, and my parents. And so, we grew up in what I would call a really good environment, And so I got into the brokerage business after college and started in municipal bonds. And a friend of mine that was one of my college professors got me the job. And he told me, he says, Kyle, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And what I didn't understand totally, that I understand much better now, is this was a sweatshop. And this place they put me in had about 120 brokers on the floor that all sold municipal bonds. Wow. And every month, the owner of the firm would let go 10 people. So every month, 10 people were getting cut.
Was this back in Arkansas, by the way, or where you located the brokerage?
This was in Little Rock. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up right outside of Little Rock. But the thing he would do is he would hire 10 people every month. And you'd have about 6 months where you had a little safety cushion that you wouldn't get fired for the first 6 months. But the 7th month, you're on the chopping block, and it's all about production. And if you're not producing, you're out of there. And I was very, very fortunate. I got into this business when interest rates were skyrocketing back in 80 and 81. And so every month when you sold a bond, at the end of the month, that bond would have a loss in it because interest rates were going higher. And you may just have sold a 7% bond, and now you can buy an 8% bond. And the next month, a 9% bond. But I was new. I didn't know the difference. And so I just kept selling every month. And by the end of the year, I was their top producing broker. And after 2 years of that, the interest rates changed. You didn't have 21% 3-month CDs at the bank. That's how high the interest rates had gotten. Wow. And they turned and went the other direction. And all those bonds I'd been selling for years now had tremendous profits in them. And so we were able to take profits, and what was theoretically a tough time ended up being an extremely good time. And I went from that firm to an institutional firm that only sold government securities and mortgage-backed securities, and became one of their top producers in the Little Rock office. They were headquartered in Memphis, but then after being there for a while, one of the bigger firms, a firm called Shearson, offered me quite a bit to move across the street and work with them. And they said, you've got retail experience, you've got institutional experience, we'd like to bring you in to equities, stocks. And that was something I wasn't familiar with. And I said, okay, all right. And with each of these firms, I'd be required to get different security licenses. And so I went to work for Shearson. We bought a company called E.F. Hutton, and then we bought another company called Lehman Brothers. And our firm rivaled Merrill Lynch in size, back before Merrill Lynch went under, of course. Yeah. And, but the thing was that it gave me a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. And then another brokerage firm hired me to run their floor and get an override off the floor. And then a bank in Fort Smith, Arkansas, wanted to open a broker-dealer. And at that point in time, there were no banks that owned a broker-dealer. And they had set up a holding company, and the holding company would own both the bank and the broker-dealer. And so I went there and started and built a very, very successful broker-dealer for the bank. And in less than 2 years' time, I was managing over $400 million for that bank. And it made that bank the most profitable bank in Arkansas for their size. And so Wells Fargo bought them.
Well,
Buy it back in, right?
Kyle, maybe explain like how all your business acumen that you acquired in Arkansas translate to you coming down here on the coast. So like what led you to Tampa? What led you into this whole world of underwater exploration?
Yeah. This company, Quality Products, was headquartered in Tampa. And when I was living here to run the company, and that's what brought me down here was Quality Products. And I got back into the brokerage business, ultimately built a firm from scratch that we took companies public, and we ended up specializing in that and having a little niche. And if you're a big company like Yahoo or Google or somebody, you go to Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch and everybody else. But if you're a little company, who do you go to? Well, we ended up being that guy. And we ended up, while I ran the company, we ended up taking over 600 companies public. And we got to the point where we were taking almost one company a day public. Now, the pipeline would be 6 to 9 months. But we had so many companies that we were working for.
Oh.
And the advantage for Seafarer from that is that with all of these public companies, I got to understand their markets. I got to understand what made them successful. I also got to see why they failed. Gives you a pretty decent handle. And you know, Tim said it correctly earlier when he says, you know, you may have a sales guy and he's good at sales, but he can't invent, right? And whereas I'm okay at sales, you know, Tim was able to take a blank sheet of paper and build something so complex with a language I don't even today understand, okay? He was able to do that from scratch and build something that nobody else in the world had ever built. And now we're going to start to put that to use. And that's why I said my previous company doesn't hold a candle to this, you know, so.
So yeah, and so I want to kind of interject too, just so like our assuming the people that are viewing this maybe haven't seen the YouTube channel yet of like Seafarer Exploration Corp and stuff, but like I want to bring the story together. So Seafarer Explorations, right? You guys had all these rights to these ships and galleons off the Florida coast. When you and I met, you had a team of people. You had a couple of riffraffers that we gave the stinky boot, and but you know you had said to me that you know you want to create this technology that can you know tell you what you're looking at. I think the exact phrase was, I'm tired of finding nails.
I did say that.
Yeah. And so and I you know here's where it all kind of like comes together, right? So I worked for Tim's company, Wild Manta, which is much more than a product development company, as Tim was saying, you know, and it's really the business factory model kind of, you know, where you do look at, you kind of do this needs assessment of like, what does this company need to get from point A to point B? You look for all of those holes, and then you try and fill those holes with resources you have within your own company, but also if it don't exist within your company, you know, I know that Tim has pulled in other product development companies that specialize in this, and he's brought in people over here that were good at branding, and he would bring and pull all these people together and then use his own skills to solve some of those problems, write the corporate governance, do all of those things. When Kyle came to me, I had all this background with Tim and doing it with Tim and watching Tim do it and kind of learning from that. And And when Kyle came to me and said, I'm tired of finding nails, I want to know what I'm looking at. I was like, I know a guy.
Right.
I know a guy.
Right.
And so that's kind of, and then we made the introduction. And then so you have these two completely different human beings with completely different backgrounds and completely different personalities. You guys, watching you guys together, honestly, in some of your meetings is absolutely hilarious. Like I kind of wish Connor, we would start putting cameras in on some of their interactions in their planning
Probably
meetings.
better we don't.
I don't know. I think we should.
Like the left
we
and
can
right
edit
side
those.
of the
Yeah,
brain.
we're not going to edit any of this, but we'll edit those anyway. Those two worlds, your two worlds, collided, right? Tim's being the commercialization expert that he is, Tim having this background in geolocation and all of these other principles, and then Tim's also like this insane researcher. Like if you see Tim looking at his computer doing this, just don't go in his office. Just,
Right.
You just stay clear. Stay clear. But he's an amazing researcher. So, long story short, you guys coming together, he had kind of what you needed to kind of solve that problem. And then I know, Tim, as because you have that principle, you don't just want to create the thing, you want to help the company. So you even were identifying strategies and plans to multi-site strategies and all of these other things. Like you were identifying things that Seafarer could do better as well. So you kind of brought in all those levels of expertise, and you were helping Kyle, who was already doing a good job. But there's holes. There's holes in every company, right? So
maybe to that point, Matt, explain what is happening, what the synergy is between your skill set, Tim, and what was needed at Seafarer Exploration, because the underwater treasure hunting world is extremely complex. It's been done the same way for a long time, operating off centuries of data, but what are you guys doing that's never been done before? Because that's what's happening.
Sure. So
let's do that.
when Kyle came to me, or Matt and Kyle came to me and talked about the idea of building a technology that could identify precious metals under the seafloor, I didn't immediately say yes.
No, you didn't.
I know.
I
Not even close.
now my background.
I thought he
Not even
blew me
close.
off.
No,
It was like,
no,
this guy listened to me.
No,
and said,
100%.
"Nah, I'm not doing that."
Here was my fear. There was one time I brought.
One of the few times I didn't immediately say yes.
No. What I was honestly worried about, Tim, do you remember that guy that I brought you one day? He had this idea for a hover car.
Yes.
Oh no, is this a real thing that happened?
Yeah.
We got to unpack that.
This guy had an idea for a hover car, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I brought it. I said, "Yeah, come and meet up with Tim." He took, and there's nothing wrong with the city bus, but he took the city bus with his COO, and his COO came in with him, and this guy was like wearing a trucker hat. His pants didn't fit. He didn't. I mean, I feel bad. He could barely put a couple of sentences together. I'm like, Tim's gonna kill me. Like this is. and watch. So I was worried. I know you weren't that way, but I was worried that
because I didn't know about the previous one.
Right. I was worried if I bring Tim this treasure hunter, is Tim gonna be mad at me? Is Tim gonna kick me out of his office and say, Matt, we're friends, just stop bringing me things, But that's not what happened. Yes, sorry. I had to throw in that story.
That's a good one, man.
Yeah.
Now, I have, 20 plus years of doing communication and geolocation technology. Yep. So the reason I couldn't say yes is I had to really understand the problem, which is what my nature is trying to understand. So I spent 4 months researching, not treasure hunting per se, but shipwrecks, how they're sunk, how they're found, how to go about that process. And with some of the technology that was available to me, because I've been working in that industry for almost 20 years, I was able to say with confidence that we could build a product that would do what he needed it to do. Now, if that product had been built at any other time in history, it would have been much quicker, but we quickly got COVID, we quickly got supply chain shortages, we quickly got a whole bunch of things that caused us to not necessarily be able to get the parts we need to get.
So was it late 2019 or in the middle of 2020 that you agreed on this project?
Yeah, mainly we were hitting the stride
19.
in 2020. Yeah. But
Started in 19.
Yeah, started in 19. We built the first prototype in 19, and we're trying to get the next iteration done in 2020. So COVID really has caused a big issue, but also the problem itself. You know, we're right out there on the edge with machine learning. We're right out there on the edge with sensitive electronic equipment. So it's a really interesting addition to what I had already been doing for 20 years, and in a very unique market. And what people keep saying, man, you could use this and Kyle does, and I hate that, but you could use this to find buried cables. You could use this to find. You could use this to find landmines. You could use this to find this.
Fly it over a field.
I go, hell no! I want to use it to find sunken ships.
Dude, every time Kyle says that to someone and Tim's in his presence, Tim just goes,
I just want to find sunken vessels. And there's two reasons. One is there's a huge historic element to what we're doing, which is way more interesting than finding somebody's cable.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think
Way more interesting.
I do think Kyle wants to find treasure too, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little
Thank
bit.
you,
Yeah.
Connor.
some
Yeah.
people count sheep. He
Just a
to
little
go to
bit.
sleep. He counts coins.
But I think,
know?
I think that's a focus thing too. You know, you wind up with, if you build a technology, and this one's focused on finding sunken vessels, and for the people that are listening, a lot of people think a sunken ship, you're going to dive in the water and you're just going to see, there's a ship. No, it's after 300 or 400 years, it is melted into the sea.
So it's not like the cartoons.
It's not like the cartoons.
Okay.
You don't find a ship. So that's what I had to find out, because that was what my initial thought was, is why don't you just dive and see it there, you know? So, after he explained it to me, and then I actually did the studying, they totally melt into the seafloor. They're indistinguishable from the surrounding. And in fact, the one off Melbourne Beach, if you were to strip away the water, it would look like a desert. You would not see a shipwreck there at all.
Right.
It was only through the sensor technology that you actually began to see that shipwreck. Now, what a lot of people did with shipwrecks at that time, which is why we're different, is they find a shipwreck, but they don't know what they're looking for. And a lot of times they're looking for gold. Sometimes they're looking for other cultural material. So they just start digging everything up because they don't know what to dig up. Mm-hmm. And in doing that, a lot of times they destroy the shipwreck. And that's what the archaeological community and the regulatory community has issues with.
Right.
The traditional treasure hunter destroys, or has the potential to destroy, the cultural resource, the history, going for the treasure. And our technology is precise enough, and the 3D imaging sonar is good enough that we can see what's down there before we dig, so we know where to dig. Mm-hmm. And then once we are digging, we know the difference between a bunch of iron and a bunch of gold and silver and brass and copper and various materials that would be of a historic shipwreck.
Right.
So the idea is that you're more doing precision archaeology than you are just blatantly digging something up.
Right.
And I think that's a huge step forward, not just in the economics of the business that Kyle's doing, the Seafarer's doing, which is a lot of times a treasure hunter could spend years and years and years on a shipwreck to find out there's really nothing there. Mm-hmm. Okay? So the faster we can screen out is or is not something there.
Right.
and then how precise we can be in locating it is the economic change for seafarer.
Right.
The change for the rest of the cultural resource community is that you don't have to destroy the shipwreck to get to the portion that, in effect, anybody would want to get to, whether it's a country would want, if they could get billions of dollars into their treasury, and they would want it. If you can extract that from that shipwreck, you've eliminated any motivation that somebody who may not be willing to follow the rules like seafarer is. They're not willing to go out and dig that because they now know that shipwreck has already been harvested, or that shipwreck has already been, the things of value have already been removed from it. Yeah. So I think that's the economics of what we're doing through the technology is it's game changing from that perspective.
Now that I've been immersed in the Treasure Coast world, thanks to you guys.
Thanks.
That's a thank you for sure. Very interesting. I listen to a lot of other media outlets and what they're saying about the history here and everything, and the approaches other people take. I was listening to a podcast the other day where a gentleman who did not call himself a treasure hunter, a professional historic shipwreck salvager. I thought that was salvager. The other thing that he said was he's been at this 22 years, and he's like, it's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck. And that little bit of luck is like, man, that's a huge variable. That's not like a little variable. You guys are completely removing that aspect of it, correct? I mean, you're really trying to systematize this and make a process where this is repeatable. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. Yeah.
Gentlemen, you have to break down and get into some of the details about your partnership, what the day-to-day looks like right now, and what you guys are excited about, what you've discovered along the way, how things have changed, how the tech's improved. I mean, wherever you want to start, what's on your mind at the moment?
I'm still drawing a blank. No. A lot of people, especially down the Treasure Coast, where they're harvesting ships that have been known about for 40 years. Mm-hmm. One of the big differences in what we're doing is we're looking for brand new shipwrecks, ones that have not been found before. Right. So, example, in the 1715 fleet, which is the one that the Treasure Coast is known for, those shipwrecks have been there and known since 1715. They came ashore. They were salvaged in 1715 and 1716 and 1717. They got lost a little bit to history until in the 1900s, but they weren't a secret. They weren't lost at sea. Today, all the things the Treasure Coast is known for are really the leftovers from the salvage efforts that were done in the 1700s.
Like the easy stuff to access, like loose coins and those kind of things?
So when the ship sank, it sank up near the coast. So the Spanish and the French and anybody that could come along afterwards took as much off of those ships as they could. So what we found, what Mel Fisher found and all those guys found in south of here is the leftovers. It's what the Spanish didn't get, what they couldn't find, didn't have the technology at the time, didn't have the resources, got driven away for whatever reason. It didn't get recovered. So the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been recovered have been leftovers. So what we're actually looking for off the Melbourne coast is one or more of the ships that sank at sea. They've never been found again. There were no survivors. So you don't always know exactly where to look.
Right.
So you could spend years scanning and searching and scanning and searching. And the whole idea of the technology is it allows you to rule in or out areas quickly. So it's to change the economics of the search. And you have to start all the way back at the search.
Right.
Until you get down to where you resolve down to dig here.
Right.
And that's what we're working towards. Now that's complicated by a very regimented regulatory process at the state if you're within state waters.
Yeah.
So they have a very slow, methodical process you have to go through from an archaeological perspective. So you'd love to go out and scan and just dig. Oh, dig here, get my shovel or whatever I'm using on the ocean floor dredge or whatever and dig. But you can't because technically that's state waters. So you have to go file for a permit, and then you have to wait and in some cases a year or more that you wait to get a permit.
Right.
And then you get that permit, and then not only let you do some things,
Right.
and then you could do some more things and some more things. So even finding a shipwreck doesn't mean you get benefit from it tomorrow.
Right.
It might take you years to get the benefit from it. And that's why you want to have multiple shipwrecks going on in parallel, because you're always going to hit a regulatory stumbling block or a weather stumbling block or whatever stumbling block you're going to hit. You need to be able to get around it.
And I think that's what most shareholders don't understand, is that it's not as simple as we know where some stuff is. We're going to go. It's not that simple. It's not that simple at all. The regulations of this, they definitely mess with the ability to go and just like.
And those regulations are really driven by a general attitude of the archaeological community that believes there's a faction that believes that those shipwrecks should never be touched by humans again.
Right.
Okay. But having studied those artifacts that come up, okay, and how over time they are being consumed by the ocean. It's not a time capsule.
Right.
It's not sitting there today like it sank in 1715 or 1550s
It's
or
not
whatever.
King Tut's tomb. And
No,
just
it is not King Tut's tomb sitting there. It is degrading, and eventually all of those artifacts, except for the gold, will be gone.
Right.
Gold is one of the few metals that comes out of the water the way it went in the water.
Right.
But silver will be consumed. Iron will be, anything iron-based will be consumed. All the wood is already, for the most part, consumed. So the concept of what they call in situ conservation, which is just leave it there, is a false way of perceiving a historic shipwreck. It really should be properly mapped, excavated. Now, some of that's also driven by the fact that within our own governments, the archaeological element within our governments is generally not well funded.
Right.
So they only have so many resources to deal with this stuff.
Right.
So to them, it's just, typical civil servant thing. It's more work
Right.
to have to deal with it than it is just to leave it there. So there's a challenge on their part of being funded to do this work as well. But to the extent that from a permitting perspective, we're an extension, actually, of the state's archaeological work out on site.
Well, what I love about what you guys have done, and I think that our listeners, people that are founders, and they're going for it, they're putting one foot in front of the other and stuff, is that you guys have really, in both of your careers, you've always thought outside the box, and you really brought that, I think, to this as well. When there's an obstacle, you think to it, but then you also think around it and how you can solve the problem, and you're continuing to do that. I continue to see the innovation and the ideas and the pivoting and we did this and this didn't. Hey, what if? And you guys are constantly doing what you got to do to continue to push the objective forward. Wild Manta on the technology and on the strategy, and then you with running the company. And this is it's a heavy lift. You've been doing this for how long?
15 years.
15
Not
years.
that I'm counting. 16 in June.
Well, it's tough because you have thousands of shareholders.
Yeah.
Who
around the world.
Yeah, around the world. They're like, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, well, it's just part of it, right?
Just part of it.
But Tim made some points that I'll take just a little bit further. the wrecks along the 1715 fleet area down here, those ships, after the storm came through, left them up on the beach in about 3 feet of water. These ships are 30, 35 feet plus across the beam. So they were literally like 3-story buildings sticking out of the water. So those ships were sitting in 3 feet of water, and they were like 3-story buildings sitting there on the beach. They weren't hard to find, and they had hundreds of survivors, which made camps right there and salvaged those ships. Okay, they have been salvaging those for the last 50, 60 years or more, and they find stuff every single year, and I'm happy for them. But, there's all kinds of complications that end up taking much longer than what you originally expect. So having equipment like this that can see through the sand, now we can go down, we can scan, and we can see things that we couldn't see before. And we dug almost 5 years in the wrong area. And so when you talk about, hey, this can help speed that process up, well, if I had that device then, I would have run it over that entire site over a 4, 5, 6, 7 day period, however long it took me to do it, right? And then I would know, okay, in this entire area, there's nothing here of material value, like gold and silver and emeralds and things like that. There's always cultural value.
Right.
And as another example, we just got through working this wreck out in Melbourne Beach that we found. And, that was a huge find for the archaeological world. Not that we got any thanks for it, but nonetheless, it was a really good find. And the ship probably wrecked between the 1790 and maybe 1810, 1820s, I don't know. But the bottom line was, when we took the sea searcher over it, we could see two things real clear. It didn't have a ballast pile, and it didn't have a cargo hold in it. And, originally we thought it was the whole shipwreck. And originally we thought it probably carried silver. And so we were real excited about it, in the beginning. And, we could have spent years there. Now, we will still spend a lot of time there because we will go through and investigate the wreck and try to determine its origin and see what kind of cultural value that we can determine from it. So even though we don't necessarily hit gold or silver on a particular wreck, we can still do the archaeology on it. And, the state doesn't have a budget for that. The universities, they don't have a treasure hunting budget. They might have a football budget, but they don't have a treasure budget, right? And so these are things that this type of equipment will help and certainly speed this process up. And then once Tim got involved in this, he quickly saw other shortcomings that we had. For instance, when we go down on the bottom, everything's covered in sand. And sometimes it's several feet down. Most of the time, it's at least several inches, 20 inches, maybe more. And it can be down as far as 20-something feet under the sand, because we dug some stuff in Lantana that was down 23, 24 feet before we hit hard rock bottom. All right. Right now, the current world uses these little handheld sea searchers, handheld metal detectors.
Not yet, Kyle.
I'm jumping ahead. Yeah, I know. Right. Mine's already clicking. You're right. Yeah, it's
Manifesting.
Manifesting. I like it.
But the problem is these little handheld metal detectors they make now only go down 15, 18 inches. If you got something the size of a Volkswagen and it's down 2 feet, okay, it may say that there's something there. But it doesn't tell you how deep the target is. It doesn't tell you what the target is. And then it only goes down a few inches. Okay, well, if you got 5 tons of gold sitting there, it'll go right over it and not even tell you it's there. And so Tim saw that as a shortcoming, and now he's using the technology behind our metal discriminator that'll go more than 10 meters through sand and the ocean floor. He can take that, he can miniaturize it, turn it into a handheld that we can use, and even put a screen on it that simply says gold, silver, etc. So that when the diver's on the bottom and he's going over it, our handheld will see it and tell you what it is. And you're talking about speeding the process up.
Yeah.
You know, the Sea Searcher will come along and say, hey, here's where these items are. And if you see, let's say, some large beams, and you go, hey, you know what? We need to take a look at this. Let's see if we can figure out the origin of this. This wood was preserved because it went under the sand before it could rot or before woodworms could eat it, right? And so, and then there's other delays that occur too. On our Juno Beach project, you know, divers have dove that site for, the state dove it in 1988 and included it in their master site file. And on that site, what we didn't understand at the time was that there's a teredo crust that's covering this site. And the teredo crust is hard. It's like rock. It looks like sandstone. And when you stand on it, you literally feel that you're standing on the ocean floor.
But it's actually worm shit.
Yes, hardened worm poop. Yeah. Yeah, it is.
The correct term is hardened worm poop. You understand?
Yeah, all right.
But hey, Kyle, it's like a lot of people in the industry. I want to like pull this out. Talk a lot about coins, like that's the public's perception of what you're going to find, essentially. But Orientis in this, Tim, is like, to my understanding, the Sea Searcher isn't built to find loose coins. Is that correct, or like what's the nuance
It's
there?
more designed to find the cargo hold of the ship,
Right.
where there would be bars or stacks of coins and things like that.
Like larger cultural
and individual
deposit.
coin would be challenging to find. But for example, in the Juno Beach wreck, it's just as likely that if there's anything precious, it might be what they call a splash, which they would just dig out a hole in the sand and pour molten gold or silver into that hole, and then they would weigh it and they would mark it and send it on its way. Or what they call finger bars, where they would just create little trenches and they would fill those in. So in the early to mid 1500s, remember 1492, right? So you're only talking 50 years after the New World was even found. They're figuring out how to get the gold and the silver back to the New World before they established the mints that they had, that we traditionally think of as the pieces of 8 and the things like that that are coming across. So 1550s and prior, it could just as easily be finger bars, splashes. It could even be an artifact that they just took the artifact straight from the indigenous folks and put it on the ship and sent it back. So there's no telling what's going to be on that shipwreck.
Right. But I do feel like the public's perception is, like, we see headlines, after what was the last hurricane we had, there was a headline that a few gold coins had like washed up on I think that's what people oftentimes think you all are looking for, is like 1 or 2 coins, but it's large cultural deposits. I mean, it's significantly bigger implications, right?
So we're looking for the presence of an entire shipwreck.
Right.
So one of the things that when I studied leading in that 4 months was, there is no doubt there are hundreds of shipwrecks along the eastern coast of the United States from the colonial period. It's almost, I don't think any of us would travel today if we had the likelihood of dying on our trip.
No.
Like those folks did, right?
No.
So when you think about the number of ships that sailed and the number of ships, there was a reasonable likelihood, if you left Spain or France or England and came to the New World, you may not survive getting back.
Right.
That was a really good probability. What would you think if you were heading up to Washington, D.C. or someplace, and they said, well, there's only about a 30% probability you'll live through the trip? You wouldn't go. But these were different people. This was a different time. So there's a lot of ships that didn't make it back for various reasons. Storms was one reason. Before they discovered these teredo worms, the teredo worms, by the way, don't exist in the Mediterranean waters. They don't exist along the coast of Spain and France. They only existed in the New World. So they literally were getting the ships eaten out from underneath them as they were sailing.
Jeez.
Right.
And they started leaking, and then they said, well, how do we get past that? Well, they used lead sheeting and copper sheeting. So when we find lead sheeting in Juneau, we know a particular period of a vessel, because that was what they used in the mid to late 1500s to protect their ships from these teredo worms or to patch them up.
Right.
And what's interesting is in one area you can see lead sheeting, and it's still folded. So it was what they stored in the ship's cargo bay or
That's
cargo
cool.
hold to use when the ship started to spring a leak.
So let's talk about Juneau really quick. What's exciting about Juneau?
Oh, I can tell you.
Go ahead.
It is a massive wreck. This ship is huge. And the second thing is, a lot of the shipwreck was covered up with this teredo crust. And divers that went down ahead of us, over the last 50 years or so, didn't realize that this was covered with teredo crust. They didn't know what it was. They didn't hire archaeologists like what we do, right?
Yep.
And so they didn't realize what they were looking at. Yeah. So we're extremely excited about this, because with that teredo crust protecting the wreck site, there's comments that you hear out on the internet, oh, that site's been looked over. With Juneau, this wreck, because we feel strongly it's in the mid-1500s, one of the guys, Roger Smith, who was the state archaeologist at the time, dated it 1554. But we don't know why he dated it that. And he passed away, so I can't ask him, how did you come up with that date, right?
We should get a medium.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Cool.
We have a couple of those as shareholders. Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, I'm quite serious.
Tim, do you know any mediums that we could bring into the conversation? Call real
I
quick.
can know a couple of larges, but I don't know too many mediums.
Man, Tim with the puns, man. You got it. Yeah.
I was actually
Venture gold right there.
It's just huge. And because it's the 1500s, they were still killing the Incas and Mayas and Aztecs and all that kind of stuff, the Spanish were. And during this period of time, I think that it potentially could have had Aztec type artifacts, like, gods that they would pray to, shields that they would wear maybe on their chest, or bracelets and things like that they would wear, or ornamental type stuff. And if it did have original, and I'm not saying it did because I don't know, okay, but that stuff would just be awesome to find. That's all pure museum pieces.
Right.
And that's certainly something we want to do, is be able to show the world this. And that's why we made the decision to not sell the treasure.
Right.
And, there's nobody that I know of that does that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying I don't know anybody that does that.
Right.
Down here, somebody finds a silver coin, they're at the pawn shop in a heartbeat, man. State doesn't get it. Nobody gets it but the pawn shop. And so we've got a whole different program going.
To your point, Kyle, the conversational or the conservational really piece of what you're all doing, or how you've structured the company, where you're not like taking the stuff to the pawn shop so to speak,
Right.
That feeds right into what you were saying, Tim. You guys are going about it in a way that is really sensitive and helpful to the archaeological and the ecological communities.
And it drives all the way back to how we document what we find. Because for an artifact to be of museum quality, for an artifact to be of its highest, both cultural and monetary value. A lot of archaeologists will never put a monetary value on something, only a cultural value. The cultural value and the monetary value are both optimized if you properly document the provenance of that artifact, how you found it, what it looks like, how you conserve it, and how you curate it. So you can't separate one from the other. We have to do all those things at a very high level, because if that artifact is never going to be taken to the pawn shop, never going to be sold for its gold weight, which is really what they wind up selling them for usually, not much more than that. We have to do all that stuff.
Right.
And a lot of folks don't take that into account when the traditional treasure hunting isn't like that. So we are, far more of a, archaeological exploration and conservation than we are to that ilk than a treasure hunter.
And from the minimum research I've done too, Tim, it just begged more questions for me. Like, when you pull this stuff up to the surface, there's like a stabilization process and everything to make sure that these are essentially survive and are able to be preserved. Is that the case?
Yeah, you have to have a plan before you recover something, how you're going to stabilize it, and then once you stabilize it, how you're going to conserve it. And there's not every artifact is for conservation. So a good example is a spike or a piece of the ship's structure that once you have 100 spikes, you don't need 150 or 200. So we may leave that spike, and we actually had having interesting conversations with conservators about how do we treat that artifact so that it actually stops degrading, and we put it back in the water. And there's also
Rust-Oleum.
And there's a tourist. Well, we actually engaged not Rust-Oleum, but we did engage with 3M on what treatments we could do to that artifact to help stabilize it in the water. And there's a tourism aspect to that. So once we complete with the Juneau wreck, it'd be really nice if that wreck became a diver attraction, and you put some historic element out so people appreciate
That's cool.
The cultural significance. An interesting thing about that Juneau Beach wreck is you go along the surface and you see these ballast stones and you think, oh, there's the ballast pile. You don't understand the magnitude that ballast pile at that Juneau wreck is almost 100 feet long and 6 feet thick. So
it's actually over 100.
yeah, it's massive. It's not, oh, here's a few rocks on the surface, that's a ballast pile. It took a lot more than that to weight one of these, keep one of these ships upright. So, the sonar and the sea searcher data from that site shows the structure of that pile and points us where to explore once we get everything in place to do that. So it's not all on the surface. You have to have the sensors in order to know what to do. And then you have to have a plan for what you do once you find something. And ideally, you would have the cameras rolling the day you discover something. I mean, imagine if you were, a museum wanting to get an artifact in your display, or you're a state that wants it in their collection. You've got the video of the day the diver discovered that item.
So that's kind of currently in the. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that currently in the plan where when we get the Army Corps of Engineers permit and we're planning on having a crew?
We do all that today.
Right.
Every dive is recorded. We document all the finds, tag it, locate it, orient it, everything about it, so that we can, in the event that, and sometimes you don't know the value of the item culturally, monetarily, whatever, because it's fully encrusted. It looks like a rock laying on the bottom. And it's only your sensors that tell you there's something significant in that rock.
Yes.
Wow.
And then you bring it back to the lab. In the lab, they stabilize it, they X-ray it, and the X-ray tells us, and for example, there was an object the other day, it's a round rock-looking thing. We X-ray it, and there's something square in the middle of it. So we have to then
What is
use
it?
very fine tools to slowly remove that concretion.
What is it?
We don't know yet. Maybe I'll come back and tell you one day.
Yeah.
It's a Tootsie Roll. You know what I mean?
If it's any,
How many
anything-
licks does it take to get in the middle of
And
this
not
one?
everything's like that. I mean, one time, an artifact was brought into us where somebody had found it far offshore. It wasn't one of our guys. They brought it in and said, "We'd just like you to X-ray this." We X-rayed it, and it was a flare that was dropped from an aircraft during World War II that had been unexploded.
That's cool.
So we told the guy, this is likely an explosive device from World War II. He took it home.
Got it sitting on his desk now. It's a paperweight.
No, he called the police. They came out and looked at it. Next thing you know, there's a bomb squad out there. His street's cordoned off.
Right.
There's a guy with a big
bomb.
the big bomb suit on, and he's carrying it out away from his house. So not everything you find on the ocean floor is benign. And
Right. And we just found another larger bomb here just lately. We got to relocate it, and we're going to take the sea searcher out there and relocate this bomb. The diver found it, came to the surface, looked around, tried to figure out which buildings he was in line with.
Yeah.
Right. But he didn't have a GPS on him, so he didn't mark the location because he was diving for fish or lobster or something. Came across it, but the sands covered it up. We know it's a hedgehog bomb used to destroy submarines, and it was
wow.
unexploded. So we're going to go back, we'll find it, and then we'll have the Navy remove it. But I want to take one step further in something that Tim mentioned earlier, talking about the conservation and things. And, we have ongoing continual classes with our divers and captains on conservation and on documentation and documenting the wrecks and stuff, because that does help create the value. And it tells you, hey, this is where it came from. And as far as I know, we're the only company to do that. So I think, again, that's setting the bar in this industry. And like our lab has more equipment than the state lab. They don't have an X-ray machine.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're setting the bar for the industry, but you're even setting the bar for the future of your company. I mean, it's really, as you grow, if you don't have these things in place,
Right.
you're going to hurt. I mean, it's not going to be good. So, I mean, you guys are laying the foundation right now for not just your first find, but for all of the future finds. And you're coming up with the strategies and the plans to actually, which is, I mean, again, for our founders that are watching this, is the way you build a business, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so it's pretty rad.
And that's something also with the sea searcher. We go through trial and error. We'll take it out, we'll test it on the site, we'll see how it works. And then Tim may want to improve the algorithms or the software or the hardware or various things. And so there's a constant improving of the product itself. And these things, one, cost money, and two, take time.
Yeah.
And shareholders go, well, if you got a device, where's the gold and silver? Okay, well, I've had to wait over a year for the DEP to give us a permit. I have to wait on the Corps, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, to give us a permit. They can't give us a permit till they get the DEP permit. Again, that took a year. They have it now. Now they're processing it. Okay, well, that's great. But then you got a division that's the, Sovereign and Submerged Lands of the State of Florida Trustees, or some lengthy name of some sort, and they got to record it. Okay, how long does it take that guy in that department to record it, to finalize it, so that we get to go out there and actually begin to work? And so there's just a lot of things that delay this process. And most people don't understand all the hurdles and difficulties and things that we have to go through, because you get so many days a year that you can work where the waves are calm enough to use this type of equipment to do these things. And we're getting today or yesterday, we just got a new boat from one of our shareholders helped us get it, and it'll work in rougher seas so that we can spend more days out, right? But there's so many of these things that are time consuming. And maybe we have 2 good days and it's like, okay, let's go. They pull out and they go, oh, the lower unit just went out. There go your 2 days.
Yep.
Now you're back in the shop getting your boat fixed. It's another week or 2 before the waves are back down again. And, you know, it's continual.
But I would say that regulatory aspect is not unique to Seafarer.
Right.
I've done medical devices. They are equally as arduous.
Right.
You know, when you get into communications, there's FCC, there's carrier qualifications, there's all, UL. So every industry has its regulatory pieces.
Right.
And if you don't master those regulatory pieces, it can cause your business to fail.
Right.
You know, in the case of an engineering design, like a medical device or an FCC, if you design it incorrectly, it won't pass their tests.
Right.
And it'll never get through.
Right.
In his case, if you don't fill out the paperwork, you will never get the permit.
Right.
If you don't fill it out right, if you don't have the right if you don't have the right exploration plan, they'll reject your permit request. So,
and if you don't know the laws, like if you don't know the laws, that can mess you up. Which you had to basically become a attorney,
expert in that,
like
right.
an expert in it.
Well,
Like
with any industry, you know, one of the things that I've done for 20 years is you have to study that industry and you have to understand what the requirements are to participate in that industry, what the regulatory stuff is.
Yeah.
And then you have to master it.
Yeah.
Because the people that master that are the ones that win. If you can't master that medical device, you may never get it approved for use.
I was talking to a capital markets guy the other day, and telling them kind of about your company, and I was actually kind of just walking them through, in not as great of a way as what you guys have done today for us, but I was walking them through kind of like, here's what they have, here's what they're doing, all of those things, and I was talking about, you know, how you guys have figured out how to work with the state, stay within the guidelines, you know the letters of the law. You have all these systems and these processes and these different things that you're doing, and he was telling me, he said, you know, he goes, that's the value of their company is all of these rights, that technology, and the understanding of how to maneuver those waters. That makes their company way, way more valuable than what the share price shows in the markets. He goes, this is a greatly undervalued, I won't say his name to whatever, but he said this is a greatly undervalued company. And I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. You guys have, even while, you know, we're waiting to, and you're waiting to go and do this exploration, this additional exploration after you get your stuff, the stuff that you guys have done in the last 3 years together is mind-blowing. I mean, it is. And if my personal opinion, if the general public had any clue, I'm not talking 100% because you're publicly traded. No one can know 100%, and they shouldn't. But if they knew 75%, 50% of just the stuff and the work and the way the company's improving each and every single day to get it to the goal, I mean, I think that the company's market value is way undervalued.
Right.
Way undervalued.
And then we're going to be able to take that further. For instance, I can go over to the Mediterranean, and I'll use Italy as an example. I could go in and say, look, guys, you got all this archaeological stuff out there from the Romans and wherever and whatever, right? But you don't know where it all is, and you don't have the money to find it, right? So I'm going to help you. We'll take the Sea Searcher. We'll map this stuff. We'll give you the map. You don't have the money to dig it up, so I'm going to find you some treasure too, okay? And I'm going to get a fee for this, okay?
Right.
Yeah, I'm not, Jesus. All right. So I do want to get paid, okay? So, I'll go ahead and help them out, but it helps them find their cultural deposit, right? It helps them be able to finance their own ability to preserve and save their own cultural heritage. Okay, what treasure hunters do that, man?
Sorry.
Like,
I'm still stuck on I'm not Jesus.
Jesus was
for our viewers. Just so you know, he is not Jesus. But clarifying it is because I think they were confused when they
were
turned.
confused.
Yeah, when they started watching, they're like, "Is that Jesus?"
Yeah, right. Very funny.
Jesus was compiling his treasure in heaven.
Yeah.
Where moth and rust do not grow.
Right, exactly.
Hey, actually, he helped us out by planting it out there for us to come back and pick up now.
It's true.
Yeah.
So, Tim, how much gold is in the Juno site? Sorry, I had to do it.
First, we have to review it.
All right.
Yeah.
This is the first time neither one of them were talking.
It's quiet on the
that's
mic
a question
over on the right side of the room.
Yeah, I'm just messing around.
I think Max kind of set him up with that question.
Yeah, Max
Sorry
said,
about
"Hey,
that.
you need to make sure you."
Blame.
Put on Max.
While you were gone during our little intermission there, he was coming in and firing all kinds of things for us to ask.
Yeah. He wanted us to mess with you.
But
We did it.
Gentlemen, I will say, like, the lasting power that you've had in the industry, where this is a turbulent and difficult adventure that you're on, it's just a testament to how you've structured things, Kyle, and the revolutionary piece that you've brought to the table, Tim, and your work with the shareholders, Matt. I mean, it's just what you all have built together. It's something that I don't think the industry's ever seen before, and that's just from my perception, really getting to know you all and your staff. And I will say, from like the multiple interviews we've done with the people that are running Seafarer Exploration, the general sentiment is like, I know we're doing things right. Like that at the end of the day, they understand and are confident that they're navigating the industry in these difficult waters in the right way, and that's a testament to Seafarer Exploration. Like that, you guys, it's not just a get rich quick kind of scheme, or you still wouldn't be here.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more like get poor and have a nightmare for 15 years, right?
But that's the level of difficulty that you're taking on, and like you're saying, your partner that you had difficulties with or whatever, I'm sure he realized very quickly that finding that shipwreck, that untouched shipwreck, was a little more nuanced than he could have ever imagined, And you all are the people that are actually finally tackling that.
Right.
Something I appreciate for the people that watch our kind of podcast, which are founders and investors and people that are interested in that space. I think that the lessons that are learned just by sitting here talking to you two gentlemen are huge. The level of study and the level of planning and the level of tenacity and the idea that I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to put one foot in front of the other and I'm going to go for it. And continuing to like beat that drum and beat that drum and beat that drum and beat that drum and celebrate your little successes and continue to beat the drum and move the people forward and help with shareholders and build your staff and all the things that you guys have just continued to kind of do. I think it's just a huge testament to the kind of men that you are. I respect the hell out of both of you guys, and really, really glad to kind of be a part of it. I would encourage our viewers too to go check out your guys' Seafarer's YouTube channel is stupid good. Seafarer Exploration Corp, like 100%. They should go check that out.
Who is doing that YouTube channel?
I think it's
They're really good, whoever they are.
But hey, let me.
Legacy something.
I'm gonna.
They should go check it out.
I'm gonna steal your usually your land the plane question here, Matt. I want to know with you guys. There's certainly easier ways to live your life than build a public company that has as long as history as yours has had, and trying to find lost Spanish wreckage hundreds of feet under in the water and ocean floor, accounting for both. So what drives you all to finish this mission every day, just personally? What's that driving force for you, Tim? If you want to start.
I'm just hooked on the creative process. I call it, I call it a passion. My wife calls it an addiction. I really am
Good old Susan.
consumed with solving the problem. And this particular problem is so multifaceted and so intriguing because it involves not just technology but history. And and I'm a history fanatic, I love history. So just the idea of doing that and engaging with the archaeologists and the researchers and one of the reasons, like for example, that the conservation lab is 2 doors down from the technology lab is so the engineers can go over there and pick up a 1500s cannonball and figure out how to find it. It's a really dynamic, engaging thing, which to me is far more thrilling than, let's say, building a cybersecurity, device, because I'm dealing with real physical things,
Yeah. On a personal side, like what drives you? Because something I've always appreciated, something I tell a lot of our shareholders. So I don't think I've ever told you this. When you had just started Wild Manta and I came on board and I was beginning to assist on the business development side, I watched someone come in and you were a startup, right? I mean, you've had your own success, but the business needs to stand on its own, right? So you were a startup that was helping these startups, and so this person, they came in, they had an idea, they had money for you to build their idea, and after a couple days, you called them and you said, I think it's a bad idea. So I'm not going to build it because I don't want you to waste your money. That told me the kind of guy that I was working for. And that's why I had confidence to bring this guy to you. And that's why I had confidence when you said, Matt, it could be done. I believe that you could do it. So, I mean, on an ethical side, like what drives Tim, as far as Tim the businessman, Tim the dad, the father, the husband?
Actually, what's interesting is I'm fortunate that 2 of my 3 children work with me.
Yeah.
And I get a joy every day of working with them and mentoring them. And if you look at my staff, most of it is new grads or interns. I love that mentoring aspect and helping turn that creative light on in them when I study and a solution or a problem and come up with a solution. And I like seeing them accomplish more than they thought they could ever accomplish.
Yeah.
So just the joy of working in that environment every day beats the heck out of anything else that I could be doing at this stage of my life. And I've been really, really fortunate in that even when I was an employee at Harris Corporation, they let me play like that. And I call it play because I don't think I've ever worked hard. I've really have always had the opportunity to be put in an area where I can solve problems. And that's just what I live to work on, is solving problems and working with people. And I had a really good mentor. And this may be an old cliche, but he said it to me and it meant something. He said, it's not what you accomplish yourself that makes you a good leader. It's what you accomplish through others.
Yeah.
So I would be nothing without the great team of people that I have around me.
Awesome.
I can think of nothing and build nothing without inspiration from God and the willingness of the people around me to follow that guidance.
That's cool.
I can do nothing.
That's good.
How about you, man?
Wow. Well, hearing that, mine sounds pretty crappy. I'm all about wealth and the creation of wealth. I know. But like Tim, I feel God was a big part of this. He took me through some rough times. The family stayed together during these rough times and roller coaster rides that I had, and changing of companies and businesses, and we were very blessed because when I was here trying to raise some money to keep the company afloat, I met all these scientists, and I kept asking these scientists, hey, can you build something that can see gold and silver under the sand? No, that can't be done. No, it can't be done. No, here's your problem. Here's another problem. You got ocean water. You got sand. You can't run electricity through it. You don't have an X-ray on the other side to pick up the beam as it travels through the whatever you're going through, right? All I heard was no, 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 and no, you know. And and again, I think there's some kind of divine guidance here that I was able to meet Matt Helmenthaler. And, you know, Matt heard what I wanted to do, and I did tell him I am so tired of finding nails, okay? And so he knew to introduce me to Tim. And I explained the problem to Tim. He was very patient, had a lot of questions, and he said, let me think about it, and I'll get back to you. 4 months went by. It was like, okay, you know, after like 2 days, it's like, yeah, okay, this guy, he's not going to help me, you know. And I didn't realize how intense he was, you know, in the depth that he goes to.
Yeah, he didn't just shoot you an answer off the top of his head like everybody else talked to you.
Right. No, he dove deep into it. And when he came back, he had a real answer. And he had thought out these processes and how you build something that can shoot some kind of super beam into the ocean and tell you what kind of metal it is.
He built you a flux capacitor.
Yes, something very
That's
close to that. Exactly. Exactly.
The dock over there.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And to be
Doc
able to,
Brown.
again, to create those things from a blank sheet of paper, you know, that it just boggles my mind, you know, how he's capable of doing that. And again, thanks to your help again, Matt, we had the good fortune of being able to keep the company financed, and you've been an integral part of that. And so the combination of these things have allowed us to get to where we're at.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I was working by myself, raising money every month for 15 years on a company that never succeeded as far as finding treasure. Oh, you're a treasure company? How much treasure have you found? That'd be none. You know, but could you put some money in so maybe I could? You know, where's your stock? Oh, it's sub-penny. You know, oh, you're a sub-penny stock, a treasure company, and with no treasure. Oh, yeah, I'll load up on this one, right? You know, back the truck up, fill it up, right? And, you know, so
Kyle,
there had to be some kind of divine intervention to make this happen.
I agree.
Well, Kyle, I have to push back a little bit on your I'm just the money man, I'm just the wealth guy kind of thing because, you know, I have a really good friend, accountant, who, you know, couldn't be any more different than me. You know, I'm a designer. I'm a visually sophisticated. You know, Excel sheets don't mean much, you know.
Right.
But one of my very good friends, who brilliant accountant, he told me one day, he said, Connor, you understand that there's no mission without margin. He's like, those things don't operate independently of each other, or you have a hobby, right?
Right.
And so
Or you have a
in your
hobby.
case, what you're doing is also it is like crucial to pushing the cause forward, and you use your lens to push the company forward, and it's a part of the creative process, just like Tim's engineering skills, you know. So I think just from observing Kyle and how friendly you are, and like the conversations I see you having with people, and the joy that you admit that when you're talking to one of your shareholders or just anybody that you run into, you know, it seems like pleasing those people and just making people happy seems to be a big part of you as a person.
Thank you for saying that, because I really do care about people, especially my team, okay? I will stand up and fight for my team, all right? No doubt about it.
I've seen dozens and dozens of startups, okay? Startups can take a year. Startups can take decades,
Yep.
okay? The startup is all about changing if to win,
Right.
okay? Every startup starts out as, if I succeed, you know, and you have to build all these different aspects, and it's unique to each company what aspects you have to build to change that if to a win. Seafarer has changed an if to a win,
Yep.
right? So that's when when you look at investing, the early stage is investing in an if.
Yep.
Later stage is investing in a win. Right. So I think that Seafarer, by transitioning from the if to a win, is just like any other startup. And I say this because you're just like any other startup, but it's true. Yeah. Whether it's a Swift Pause or a Microsoft or whatever.
Right.
At some point they switch from being if I can build this thing to when I can sell it.
Right.
And because there is an opportunity. In this case, we know the shipwrecks are there. We know the technology is there. It's a win.
And that's
win.
actually
WHEN, not win.
And you and I have never had this conversation where you use that terminology. It's really funny. That's the same terminology I use with all of the people that I talk about with Seafarer and then other ones. It's like, the goal of what we do as we're working with all these different companies and we're trying to plug in the holes is that we're trying to take away the if.
You're trying to take away
and you're trying to make it a win. All right. So if this was the timeline, we want to shrink it to here as quickly as and most efficiently as possible. I think that's what's happening with Seafarer for sure, with the help of Wild Manta, with the help of Legacy Angel Network, with the help of the rest of the community. It's a labor of love and a labor of exploration. We're all excited about what this could be, and we're just so glad you guys were able to join us today. And this is a lot of fun, and I'm sure Tim, you had a blast.
Tim, you were very tolerant of us, man. We appreciate you. And just a Steve Jobs sentiment on tech. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this quote before, but his sentiment when he released the iPhone was that people are some of the slowest animals on the earth until you give them a bicycle. Right. And so you guys are that for the industry. You are that for the treasure hunting industry. The Sea Searcher, the things that you guys have created are going to change the course of history.
Right. But, taking that just a step further, obviously I love our Juneau site because it's massive. It's old. It's, to my knowledge, never been salvaged. Right. All right. If there was 0 on Juneau, first I'd cry a little bit. Okay. But I'd get over it in a couple minutes, and then I'd go after 5 more shipwrecks that I know where they are, and they're between the 1500s and 1600s. They've never been salvaged to our knowledge. There's no records of their salvage, etc. We don't know their origin yet, but we know basic years, okay? We'd put that Sea Searcher on those. I'd find out real quick, hey, do these things have anything of any value, right? And in the meantime, we can still mark what we've learned from what it picks up, even if they didn't have anything. So, this and what he's built is just phenomenal. And, he made a comment, we're looking for major wrecks. The device will see something the size of my fist. And if he really wanted to take it down to find a coin, he could find a coin.
Right.
I mean, this thing, as it scans going across our site, it was scanning almost 10,000 times across 1 foot. He slowed it down a little bit to where it's only 2,500 times?
Yeah.
Okay, 2,500 times. Okay, maybe it won't see a sheet of paper on its edge, okay? But you scan something 2,500 times in a foot, okay, I'm thinking you're getting a pretty decent picture, okay? And just the way this thing is working is phenomenal. But the help from all you guys, and Connor, you and Aubrey helping us with getting some exposure because nobody's ever heard of us. I don't advertise. I don't promote. I'm not out there pushing the stock. I don't believe in doing things artificial because that's my background as a broker. And a lot of those companies I took public, they'd do these promotions and they'd pump the stock for a couple of days and then it just collapse. And I saw it repeatedly.
You're not building a stock, you're building a business.
That's right.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, I want it to be the best there ever was.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure that happens. And take some time. But when I have people like you guys around me, oh my gosh, it makes it so much easier.
Well, to quote Hannibal from the A-Team, I love it when a plan comes together. Guys, thanks so much for being on with us today.
All right.
Cheers to that, y'all.
Yeah, man.
All right, guys.
Kyle and
Blessings.
Tim, everybody, thanks for listening.
Oh, thank you.